Just some framing words. We have two sets of elections coming up that are really, really important to all of us. It isn't just about the board election for vice president. The deal with the vice presidential election is that we are not voting as a caucus. We are not a caucus. We are as diffuse in our opinions as dust thrown into the air. Nevertheless, we are progressives. We know what's what, and if anyone has any interest in discussing who the best VP candidates are towards the end of the meeting, happy to throw some ideas around. Nevertheless, concentrate on the presidential candidates. All good people, all well motivated. Some of your questions are going to be even a bit
and short.
Short, number one, thank you, David. And number two, remember the spirit in which we, as progressives, are delivering all of this. We love them all to bits. Jonathan's the first.
Yes. Well, you all know Jonathan. I think Jonathan knows everybody. Jonathan has been a benevolent spirit looking down at us from the platform for 6 years, and now he is standing for an even higher platform, and we're very grateful that he's come. He must by now being a bit husting out, but nevertheless he's going to talk to us about his views about the board and then some thoughts about the progressive element. Jonathan.
I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I did have some prepared remarks about my pitch, but I'm just going to throw them aside for the moment because there's something much more important that I want to say in view of some comments that have been made and reported in the media. I want to say with as much emphasis as I possibly can, and on the basis of having spent 30-something years as a deputy, that I cannot imagine a more non-denominational place than the board in our community. In 6 years of being vice president and chair of the Defence and Group Relations Division, of which some of you here are members or have been, David has been a sterling member throughout that time, I cannot remember a single decision which I have had to take in which my particular affiliation has had any relevance at all. And I doubt that David can remember any reference to affiliation in the deliberations of the Defence Division for 6 years.
So,
I want to make it clear that, in my view, the candidate who individual deputies should support for office at the Board of Deputies, the candidate who you think will provide the most credible and effective leadership on their merits. It's irrelevant, surely, what shul they belong to, what shul they go to, or indeed, what shul they go to. And only recently I wrote a piece in the Jewish on this very subject, and I said it was about 3 months ago, so before election. I said it together with someone else who commented in a slightly different vein, but I think leading to the same conclusion, and that person was Andrew Gilbert, who will be well known to many of you, and who I thought I would see tonight, but he might be hiding under a chair somewhere, but I can't see him.
Not here.
Now, everybody knows what end of the community I happen to go to. I was born into United Synagogue parents. I have attended United Synagogue all my life. That's me. That's who I am. And why on earth it is relevant that I go to Boreham Wood United Synagogue and Stephen Lee, my neighbouring deputy, goes to Elstree Liberal Synagogue, I really don't know, because I hope you won't think it is relevant. I strongly support, and I'm not just saying this because he's here and I'm here, but I strongly support, I'll make it clear, Stuart MacDonald for Treasurer of the Board. His opponent happens to be a member of the United Synagogue. I'm keeping a straight face. But I support Stuart because I think he's got the qualifications for the job. And I think he's got better. And it's relevant to me that Stuart is a member of a different synagogue body, or even if he wasn't a member of a synagogue at all, I would still support him, and I do. Now, I do have form here, and let me spell out a little bit of it for you. The last time I was here was just a few weeks ago, when I attended a meeting of the Council of Liberal Judaism. Gillian Meron had been invited to speak because the council was considering its future representation on the Board of Deputies, and an invitation was extended to the honorary officers of the board. As you know, there are 5 honorary officers of the board. 1 came. That was me. I was delighted to be here. In the past 6 years, I have made more visits than I can actually remember. I have spent at progressive synagogues, such as the one at Jackson's Row in Manchester, which was quite early on, 6 years. I have twice been to the annual general meeting of Northwood Liberal Synagogue, last year and about 3 years before that. They weren't going to have me last year, but their speaker cancelled quite late, and they asked if I would come, and I said, "Are you sure you want me back?" And they said yes, they did, and I was very pleased to go. I am regularly at the LJS for occasions like the Hanukkah lighting, which is a remarkable occasion, as probably you know. But I also have form within my own Orthodox denomination, and I don't mind telling you about it. And I know that it won't necessarily chime with you, but please accept it, that within the Orthodox denomination it's quite significant. I am a strong supporter of Partnership Minyanim, which are the movement within Orthodoxy to give greater roles to women. And while I know that you will say, well, what took them so long, and it's obvious, and da-da-da, I accept that, but please accept within Orthodoxy, it's a halakhic question. It's not so straightforward. It's cutting edge. It is resisted by the Orthodox leadership, including the chief rabbi. Well, fair to say, maybe not as strongly as it might be, and I'm willing to bet that it's the future. And our home has seen the Partnership Minyan at Boreham Wood, which is actually the one that's furthest forward in this country. We've hosted it. I attend it. It's once a month at the moment. It will be more frequent. And that's not just because my eldest daughter happens to be co-chair of it. It's because I believe in it. So that's where I stand on denominations. And it's precisely because of that I want to tell you now, and I only said this publicly last week, that I profoundly disagree with the comments made by Stephen Pack, President of the United Synagogue, when he said that Laura was a divisive candidate. Had someone from here said I was a divisive candidate because I came from the United Synagogue, I would have bridled at that remark. And equally, I bridle at the remark that Laura is a divisive candidate because she comes from a non-Orthodox synagogue. Because consistently with what I've said before, it simply makes no difference. And finally on this, I will say, my father married a lady from a Reform synagogue, my mother, and I married a member of a very keenly committed family at Edgware Reform. So we are, if you like, a pluralist, cross-communal family. My children have turned out, well, a tad more orthodox, as one's children can be. But my youngest daughter, who lives in Jerusalem, she goes to even more egalitarian Orthodox minyanim than even I might feel I would be comfortable at. So that's where I stand. And before I sit down, I will just say a few words about why I'm standing for president. As all of you who are deputies know, I stand on my record of 6 years leading the defence of our community. And it's a record which I am very pleased and happy to defend here, and I'm looking forward to your questions. The truth is, all our aspirations for a thriving community, all our aspirations for tikkun olam, for the importance of the environment, for small communities, for social action, all of which I share, cannot exist unless, as a community, we are properly protected and defended. If something went badly wrong, and people who cared could no longer have a circumcision for their baby son, or eat kosher, we would be vastly diminished as a community. It doesn't matter whether individually you may or may not keep kosher or believe in Brit Milah. Many of us do to one extent or another, and we would all be diminished. And therefore, it is essential that our community remains at liberty to practice its religious values, and we cannot take this for granted. Because when we are only 300,000, 1/2 of the population, actually I think it is a considerable tribute to the Board of Deputies for so many years to have been able to have held the line. And as you know, the attacks on Shechita are coming more regularly and becoming more virulent than they have been before. And finally, before I sit down, very epicenter of how we feel about being Jewish, almost whatever our feelings. And I know there are people here who feel a different sense than I do, and there's a spectrum, and I may be at one end, you may be at one end, but Israel is important to us. And while we are British Jews, and I'm passionate about being British as well as passionate about being Jewish, Israel is important. And the attacks on Israel are also growing, more virulent. I have been proud to have played a small part in our issues to the heart of our opponents. And only last week I was on Al Jazeera in a fiercely hostile environment. You can find the link on Board's community briefing last week. And if you want to watch what it's like to be on the edge of a battleground when an audience radiates hostility, not to say something worse, you can go and watch that video. You might also see something on Twitter tonight about George Galloway's Respect Party, when a Jewish journalist called Ben Judah went to a Respect rally. And the bouncers, 10 of them, attacked him and called him an effing Jew and said, "Get out, effing Jew." Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot risk wishful thinking. There are unpleasant forces opposed to us in our society. And if I'm elected, I promise that I will continue, based on my past form, to give firm leadership on these vital issues, just as much as I want to be on the cutting edge of making our board a better place. Thank you.
Over to you to ask Jonathan a question. Short and sharp, please, everybody. Over there.
Jonathan, nice to meet you again. I'm also a Liberal. You said the board is non-denominational. You've had a spokesperson from the movement for Reform Judaism. You've had the United Synagogue spokespeople, as well as the chief rabbi. When did you last have a spokesperson from Liberal Judaism to speak at a plenary?
Oh, you mean as a guest at the plenary?
Yes.
We have an outstanding invitation to Rabbi Danny Rich. These decisions, I should say, are not my decisions. And so far, I don't think he's been found a slot. But Laura Jana Klausner came.
Yes, and Reform.
I think she came before the chief rabbi and before the Sephardi about 18 months to 2 years ago. So I think in the cycle, I don't think there's been any discrimination.
Certainly in my tenure, you've not had a spokesperson from Liberal Jews.
Oh, okay. So Liberal United, that turn will only come round maybe once every 4 years or so.
Okay.
But Danny is due.
Anthony?
Anthony, West London. What policies of the present president, Vivian Weinman, did you find unsatisfactory and disagree with, and what do you propose to do to remedy some of the directions?
Is it all right if I sit down? I really don't think I should get into voicing any public criticism of my colleague, the President, and I don't think that would be a right thing to do, and I don't want to be invidious about it. I'll tell you one thing, if I may, which is not a criticism of Vivian. It's where I think the board has moved to and where I think it should move further. Vivian has tried manfully to control the behaviour of certain individuals at Board of Deputy meetings on Sundays. We have, for example, made speaking time a little bit shorter so that there's room for more people to speak, and that was the right thing to do, against vehement opposition from some of those individuals. Vivian has also made it clear that speaking at the board should be regarded as a privilege, not a right, and that more speaking time, more airtime should be given to people who don't regularly speak and who might actually feel intimidated by the same individuals who keep on speaking, some of whom also have a sort of habit, I'm not being personal about this, of course, of pacing up and down and looming over people. Yes, thank you. And I want to go further in that direction. But it's fair to say, leadership is an edgy place to be, and you sometimes have to take difficult decisions, and you can't go too far and too fast. So Vivian having gone as far as he has, I think we can now be a little bit bolder and take it further. And I will, if elected, actually go further in saying speaking at the board is a privilege and not a right, and since you have already spoken at the last ex-board meetings, enough already. And it's time to have people who may be shy.
Okay. Right, you, then you next. Go.
Sheila Levitt, to be honest. Are there any areas that the board can improve upon?
None whatsoever. We're perfect. Sheila, of course there are. We can all improve upon. I can improve myself. You know the story of the young man who decided that he was going to change the world. It's an old Jewish story. So he goes out and he thinks to himself, I'm going to change the world, because he's 18, right? Or 19 and full of idealism, is going to change the world. And he tries and he realizes actually it's quite a tall order. So he decides to change his town. So he goes out into the town and he tells people we've got to give more to charity, we've got to clear the rubbish up, we've got to look after the environment better. And he realizes it's actually quite difficult. And finally he realizes, actually, before you change the world, you've got to change yourself. Now, I accept that. I've given one reason I think the board can be improved, but let me give another, because I think I'm going to be asked about it, and I think it's a fair question. We learned some hard lessons during the summer. It wasn't an easy time for any of us. There was a 51-day conflict in Israel, which pretty much came about by surprise, and it certainly went on much longer than expected, and summer holidays when people were away. For almost half the conflict, I was actually in Israel, celebrating my daughter's wedding. And virtually every day during that time, I should tell you, from my car, from my hotel room, in Jerusalem, I was giving media interviews. But it was a very tough time for our community, and I think they felt that the leadership of the Board of Deputies was not visible enough. I'll let you into a secret. Before I went away, when the conflict had started, I said to my fellow honorary officers, I thought that we should use 21st century technology, and the leaders of the community, like Vivian, should give a regular, weekly or daily, internet broadcast to members of our community to keep them up to date with what's going on and what we're doing about it. Because so many of the things we were doing actually never got through to the Jew in the pew. I'm afraid my fellow honorary officers rejected the idea, but I'm more convinced than ever that we should have done it.
Okay, two more. Robert, two more to go. That's it, folks.
One of the toughest aspects of the job of president is that you have to represent the whole spectrum of Jewish opinion in Britain, on Israel from the extreme right to the left, on anti-Semitism from those who call the others complacent to those who call the others paranoid. It's a tough call, and you have to represent people who disagree with everything you believe in. How are you going to handle that?
I've never had a problem, Robert, in dealing with people I don't agree with. I mean, after all, you and I, we differ, for example, on how the board might achieve internal reform, but I don't think we've ever had a problem getting on. I had...
Sorry, to clarify, I'm talking about the representation.
Oh, sorry, you mean... just
Representing Jewish opinion outside the board.
I've never had a problem with that either. I mean, the board represents the consensus. Vivian has been extremely good in generally not conveying to his audiences what wing of the community he happens to belong to. He's got particular views on Israel, which are not the same as my views. I have done my best when I've gone away and talked about Israel to talk about the consensus view and not betray my own no. And you might be surprised if you did know them.
Two more to go. Okay, Dan.
Johnny, thanks for speaking tonight. Appreciate it. I'd like to look at progressive with a small p. I might come from a Reform single background, but I think it's more of a value set for me. And I'm more interested in why you do or don't think certain organisations belong on the board. And this is specifically in reference to Yachad. It's more a question about values and your value set and why that goes against your inclusion of Yachad on the board.
I'm very happy to explain. Under the board's constitution, organisations with fewer than 500 members are not automatically entitled to membership at the board. Either they get admitted on a recommendation of the Constitution Committee, or on the affirmative vote, which has to be a high threshold, 2/3 of deputies, and the test in the Constitution is either explicit or it's implied, that it has to be considered to be for the good of the community. So in other words, deputies had a discretion. Now, I'm going to be very straight with you, because I know, many people here will disagree with me, but this is my personal view, and we all have our personal views. I'm very troubled by some aspects of Yachad. I totally accept their right to hold the views they do. On the inclusivist argument, which won the day, it's not such a straightforward argument. If Jews for Justice for Palestinians, or frankly, if you want Jewish Friends of UKIP, or whatever, Jewish Friends of whatever, want to apply to join the board, you might actually think and say, Now, with Yachad, as I didn't speak at the debate, and I didn't actually mention my view at all until the vote, when I just stuck my hand up when I did. I'm troubled by Yachad's support for boycott of settlements. I'm very troubled by it. Because in my experience, yes, they do. They absolutely do. And Hannah, I've shared enough platforms with Hannah, and who, by the way, I'm very friendly with, and we were on that programme together on Al Jazeera. And in my experience, partial boycotts always morph into full boycotts. And I don't accept that. The second reason is that their trips to Israel are focused almost exclusively within the West Bank, on the disputed territories, call them occupied territories, call them settlements, call them whatever you want. I'm not going to advocate any particular name. And they spend a lot of time with people of one particular view and NGOs like Breaking the Silence. And Breaking the Silence are troublesome to me because they seem deliberately to set out to blacken Israel's name abroad. I'm very sorry, I don't agree with that. So I took the view that when it came to exercising my personal discretion, I could exercise it according to my own particular views. And I know I was out of sympathy with the majority of the board, and don't you think I knew that when I voted it would be known, and don't you think I knew that when I voted it was near enough to an election that in some people's eyes it would count against me. But you know what? If anyone who knows me knows that if I feel something has to be done or said, even if it costs me personal popularity, I'll do it, because that's the sort of person I am. If you don't like it, please vote for someone else.
Right. Yeah, Stanley Gork, FPS Venture Progressive Democrat. About 5 years ago, you and I all members of the president at the Red Cross with the boycott campaign. Since that time, going back to Israel, since that time I think things have deteriorated badly with the PS campaign to stop buying goods from settlements, as well as Israel, to say part of the campaign turned into whole boycotts. Could I ask, if you are elected president, will you press for a more visible boycott campaign against Israel?
Yeah, I mean, we have very little time to say it. I think we're going to get it tonight or tomorrow, my one-pager, but you also saw, some of you will have seen my email. I had a bit of trouble sending it because I stupidly put 300, no, never mind. Kept me up most of the night unscrambling that one. But I say that we should mount a more vigorous defence of Israel, and that absolutely includes taking positive action like boycotts, and I've been on all the boycott things. And I think, I'll just give a very tiny example. A rather troublesome body out there invited me to come and speak to them, called the Diocese of Herefordshire Middle East Study Group, which all sounds lovely. But believe me, it houses some pretty oppositional people. So I crick off to Herefordshire for the evening, and I sat in a hostile room. It wasn't nearly as hostile as the Oxford Al Jazeera, but I think we should do that, because many people come up at these events and they say, I agree with you, but we didn't even know what the case was for Israel. We didn't even know there was a case. We thought Zionism was something rather dark and satanic and unpleasant, and now we understand what you're on about.
Just to supplement that.
Okay, sorry. No.
Obviously, we have time.
Yes, I think we're going to have to draw this to a close. Those who haven't been able to ask Jonathan a question, I will ask next to ask questions of our next speaker. Is there anything you'd like to say very quickly?
There is something I want to, because there is. I saw something on social media recently, and some of you will have seen it. And the person concerned is here, so I want to take the opportunity to say it. And that person has said that although I'm commendable in dealing with some of Israel's enemies, and indeed people who have strayed across the line into anti-Semitism, like Reverend Stephen Sizer, who the Archbishop of Canterbury apologised for last night, and we sorted that particular situation out, I hope, fairly and properly. I was a person who was, and I quote him, in attack mode. I want to tell you with all the force that I can, I think that person has done me a considerable personal injustice. I'm a barrister. I work in court. I'm a part-time judge. And in all the work I've done for the board, when I sit down with the leader of the Church of England or the Methodist Church on boycotts, I have discovered and learned years that there is no substitute to reasoned, calm argument, because the intellectual force of our arguments will win the day much more than the force of numbers. We don't have the force of numbers. So if anyone tries to tell you I'm some sort of Rottweiler who is, out of control and I spend my time biting people on the shins, I really feel that's very unfair, and that's really all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. Well, that's excellent. Thank you. I'm most grateful. Thank you for spending this evening as well as last.
Next, yes. Johnny, thank you.
And you may have the rest of the evening off. Thank you very much.
Laura Marks, sorry. And I can keep talking long enough for Laura to find her glasses. You may notice I once, even my friends here haven't noticed, damn it. Anyway, having heard from Johnny, and that was fairly predictably good stuff, because all of the candidates, as we've said already, are well qualified and well motivated. The office of president. It's now nearer to home territory on certain levels, but as I was saying earlier, Laura, we're not voting as a bloc per se. We are progressives, we know where our hearts are, but we're, as Diffuse says, dust coming off the ceiling. I used sand last time. It's over to you.
I don't think
David.
There was dust coming off the ceiling.
No, not at all. Stardust.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. It's a slightly strange place to be because on some grounds I feel like I'm on home territory, and on the other hand, I'm asking you to elect me as president of the whole Board of Deputies, not president of the progressive movements, and everything I do and everything I say, I hope, will make that very clear. Now, I think I might stand up. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, is that okay? Sorry, Leo.
We're being streamed, by the way.
Yes, I'm aware. Thank you. So what you've asked me to do is you've sent me a list of 6 questions and asked me to talk through those, which is what I've done. But I want to start off by talking to you about my vision for the community, because I think it's crucial that a president has a vision, and my vision is of a community which is strong, secure, and socially inclusive. And more than that, it's a community which shines, which continues to shine, is fresh and vibrant and confident and focuses on action, and it's truly a light unto the nations. Now, for the board to be able to deliver that vision, we have to do better. We have to be transparent, we have to be accountable, we have to be inclusive, and we have to be professional, and there's work to do. So the first thing you asked me was about Tikkun Olam and how that fits into the board. Now, I think that this is an area that I have credentials, and I believe firmly that as Jews we are commanded to leave the world a better place. But actually, from the board, it goes much further than that. Tikkun Olam, or social action, or however you'd like to define it, is about giving back. And the beauty of Tikkun Olam is that it enables us to reach out to the wider community, particularly to reach out to the interfaith world. It's where we are able to shine and where we're able to reach out a hand of friendship. And that's why it's something that not just social action organisations, but the board itself should be doing. It's the way to reach out to wider society. The second thing you asked about was how will we ensure that all strands of Zionism are included in the board, and to make sure that we realistically advance Israel's security, welfare and standing from all different aspects. So this one is not that difficult because the board has a very clear policy on Israel, and that is that we promote security, peace, equality and prosperity for all residents of Israel. Now, this is a policy which everyone can buy into. I think you'll be hard pushed to find anyone in our community who doesn't believe in that. And I believe in it very, very firmly. Now, different organisations have different priorities and approach it in different ways. But if we keep that as the focus, I think it's a way we can represent all different strands. For me, the red lines, there are two red lines. The first one is, I don't think we should work with organisations who try to proselytise, try to convert us. The second is, I work with organisations who try to delegitimise Israel or push it into the sea. Beyond that, I think that most organisations have got, with the Zionist agenda, we should be working with, and that's why I voted for Yachad to be included in the board, because I firmly believe we should be a broad church, to use inappropriate terminology. The next thing you asked, and where I might don't want to talk too long, is how I understand the position of the progressive movements on the board. Now, there is in fact, two ecclesiastical authorities for the board. There's the United Synagogue, the chief rabbi, and there's the Sephardi movement, which actually was the original ecclesiastical authority. But since the 1970s, it's been also mandated that on issues of halakha, the progressive rabbis are consulted as well. Now, in reality, it doesn't often happen, and in reality, when it does happen, we can't agree. So, for example, on same-sex marriage, we can't agree. So we agree to differ. And that, again, is the beauty of the board. We can agree to differ. Were there a merger with the JLC, were we to become one organisation, I think we should look at how that ecclesiastical authority works. But for now, it basically does work. The next thing you asked about is gender. And gender is something I feel very strongly about. I set up Women in Jewish Leadership, having done a commission on gender. And we're just piloting at the moment something called the Gender Equalities Plan, which 3 organisations in the community are working on. And it's basically a way for organisations to look at their gender equality and ask whether they could do it better. So what I would do for the board is I would hope that within the 3 years where I'm president, we would be able to introduce it there. I didn't suggest the board as a pilot organisation. I think we have our focus on other things right now, and I'm not sure we'd have been able to do it to best benefit. So I have a very concrete plan in place for that one. The next one was red lines in terms of collaboration with other organisations. And I think this one is very much referring to the MCB. Now, the MCB does cross some of the red lines. The MCB, within its ranks, or certainly within its partnerships, has organisations which believe in the delegitimization or the removal of the State of Israel. And therefore, on the whole, I would say we should not be dealing with them. Government don't deal with them. But this summer, things were exceptional. Life was very difficult and looking like it might become more difficult. And to have a statement on anti-Semitism from the board and the MCB was incredibly powerful. It hit the front pages. To have anti-Semitism on the front was worth it. So I would say, on the whole, my red lines are clear, but sometimes it's worth it. And you ask about what I would do to promote the inclusion of more young people in the board. So last May, I set up the first Young People's Forum on the board, and we started to talk about some of the issues facing young adults in the community. There's a lot of work to do. And actually, one of the things it raises for me is, what is the job of the board? How many of the issues that need addressing within our community can we take on? How many projects, how many issues can we do at one go? Clearly, we need more young adults engaged. I think this triennium we've done quite well on that. There's a long way to go. So I think now I'll open it up to questions, and I know there's lots of other questions you have too.
Okay. Right, I'm going to take people who haven't asked a question. So, Joe over there.
You spoke eloquently on Israel and also the entire spectrum of the Zionist viewpoint in this country. Do you think that there's a place for non-Zionists on the board, or even, heaven forfend, anti-Zionists?
Okay.
Do you, please, if I may, also, do you not think that given that Israel has hundreds of diplomats, PR firms, cyber Hezbollah, it is the place of the Board of Deputies of British Jews to advocate for Israel?
Thank you.
As you heard at the beginning in my, it's all about Britain. It's all about how we feel as British Jews. Now, however you feel about Israel, what goes on in Israel impacts on us here. And we all know that last summer, with the conflict going on in Gaza, the impact on us in terms of anti-Semitic attacks and feelings of lack of security impacted on us regardless of how we felt about Israel. So on one hand, we have a special relationship with Israel, and even if we don't, or even if some people don't, it impacts on us here. Therefore, it's not something we can ignore. Now, as for anti-Zionists, well, if you mean people who believe that Israel should be pushed into the sea, it's a red line for me, actually. I don't go there. And in terms of the board, I don't think I would want people on the board who are committed to the destruction of the state of Israel. There are people who feel there are different ways to reach a peaceful Israel. I'm fine on that, but I feel there is a red line, and I think the board has to have a point at which it says we won't go any further than that.
Okay, thank you. Roger, did you?
Laura, I think one of the achievements of the last triennium has been the improvement of relations between the board and the Haredi community. Naturally, we are aware that you're a lady. Do you feel that would complicate relations with the Haredi community were you to become president?
I don't think it would make any difference at all. And the reason I think that is because it's an institutional organisation we're talking about. We're talking about the Board of Deputies. We're not talking about Laura Marks. I would be the president of the Board of Deputies, but I am not the Board of Deputies. The reason that the Haredim are not round the table is not because we have women there. Another factor is that a lot of two there, one of Spitz, and she was at the board dinner last night, as were many other members of the Haredi. I think having me there would be to make any difference at all, except one thing, which is that I'm very collaborative. The way I operate is by building relationships, making friends, sitting around the table, listening to people, and then seeing how we can actually deliver a result. So, might make it better.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right, you mentioned in your talk about the merger of with the Jewish Leadership Council. Could you say a bit more what your views are on that merger that you had a look about a year ago? It was had a sizable debate, but in the last few months it's gone a bit quiet.
Yes. So I think actually the events of the summer took the agenda away a bit, but it's very important. The community is currently paying for 2 leadership organisations. And I think that that is crazy. I don't think we have the resources to do it. I don't think it makes any sense. However, the report that was written by Ruth Lesurge as an outside observer made it very clear that our cultures are very different. We are almost chalk and cheese. And what she recommended and what we're doing is working together more and more. So the staff work together in particular. We're hoping to move into the same building together. We have to work closely together, and then hopefully over time we will actually be able to make a relationship that works really well for the 2 organisations and for the community. And it may be that it's a merger, and it may be that it's a collaboration. Whichever it is, it has to be a partnership. And again, I would come back to the point I just made to Roger, which is I believe in collaboration. I believe in sitting down around the table and talking about things. And the JLC would be, Mick Davies would be one of my first phone calls were I to be elected president.
Okay.
Thank you. Can Thank you, Laura. You obviously spoke about inclusion, social action, some of the things that were great to hear about. But also people maybe not in this room, but people who may see this. Some of the other candidates are focusing very strongly on defence issues, on anti-Semitism. Can you give us a feel for soft on that if it was President Marks?
The most important issue facing the community now is security. There is no doubt that the thing that the community is worrying about most is feeling safe. I have friends with children at Jewish schools who are fearful of taking them to school. I cannot believe we live in a Britain where children and parents are fearful to go to school. What have things come to? So clearly it's number one priority. Where I think I might differ from the other candidates might be in how I would go about addressing it. Because I don't believe that the way you deal with security, buttoning down the hatches, hiding and hoping it goes away, or by fighting everybody around you. Yes, we have to be secure. And luckily we've got a Home Secretary and a police force who are absolutely committed to our security. But beyond that, it's down to us to get out on the streets, to be seen, to make friends, to form relationships, to know the other. We're already geographically in ghettos. We're almost all of us in northwest London. The vast majority of us live very close to other Jews. There are vast swathes of the country that have no Jews in them. How are other people getting to know us? How are they not swayed by negative propaganda that they hear? The only way that they are going to know that we don't have horns, that we're not evil, we're not bad people, is by meeting us, by getting to know us, and that's where we come in. That's one of the biggest jobs of the deputies, is to get out and meet our neighbours.
Thank you. Well, there we are. Anybody else? No? Anything you'd like to... Oh, sorry,
Just one small question. You should get elected, but would you not be going to serve as Vice President?
There's two reasons. The first one, Alex and I have discussed this actually, because Alex is in the position as I am. Johnny's time expired. He can't stand for Vice President, but Alex and I could. However, for whatever reason he has, I don't know, but we both believe that we have a strong vision, and we believe that the way to carry it out is by being president. And that if you don't stand up and say, that's what I'm going to do, you lose credibility. And I think that's true. I believe I will make the best president. Now, if I'm not elected, and if whoever is elected wants me to, and they reach out to me and ask me to help them, of course I will. And I really hope that Alex would say the same if you ask him the same question. I would be there for the community. I work full time in the community. I'm not going away. If I'm not elected president, then I'll help.
Okay. Well,
but I won't be able to do what I can do as president.
Okay, well, can I ask you a question, since there's a bit of time to go, which is, we're the Board of Deputies of British Jews, not of London Jews, and there are Jews all over Britain. What can the board do to be seen to be more British?
So our legitimacy comes from our national reach. It's as simple as that. If we are just northwest London, we are not the legitimate representative body to government of British Jewry. It's as simple as that. We have to be a national organisation. So in the 3 years that I Vice President, I spent a lot of time working on the regional agenda. And the first was set up something called Jewish Connection, which is funded largely by the Community Chest, actually, organisation with a full-time member of staff, which is there only to support the regional communities. I'm also chair of the Regional Council. I've spent a lot of time bringing people in to talk to the regional deputies. And finally, I have built a relationship with all 10 Rep Council presidents around the country. We are only legitimate if we are national. And also, it goes beyond that, because the Board of Deputies can't phone up the MP Southampton when there's a problem there. We can, but it's not very credible. We can't phone up Manchester when they're boycotting on the streets of Manchester, they're boycotting the Kedem store. Done locally. It has to be done locally by local people speaking to their local MPs or their local councillors and getting action. So we have to be a national body. It's not an option.
Thank you. Well, you've got a little space to sum up. Any other thoughts? Or have you said enough?
I've probably said enough, but all I would say is that I believe that what makes me different from the other candidates is my approach. We've all got the same agenda. We all believe that we've got an issue with anti-Semitism, delegitimization of Israel, faith schools, and the regional agenda. I think everyone will tell you the same basic things. Where I believe I'm different, where I hope you have seen it over the last 3 years, is that I collaborate, I talk to people, I think things through, and finally I deliver. Now I'd like to say 2 other things because I think they may be on your mind. The first one is about, do I change my mind? Some people say I change my mind. Some people say I flip-flop. What they're particularly talking about, I believe, but you could ask them, is that I said I wasn't going to stand for president and I changed my mind. Why did I change my mind, and was it a sign of weakness? Changing your mind is not a sign of weakness. You have to be brave to change your mind. When I had made a bad decision and I reassessed it and I had other people talk to me and I looked at the evidence and I looked at the alternatives, it was a brave decision to say, I made a bad decision, I'm changing my mind. I don't flip-flop, I change my mind, and if I made a bad decision, I will change my mind again. And the second point, which I just said that is on your mind. Oh yes. Why did I join Highgate Synagogue? It's on your minds. I joined Highgate Synagogue because I have said for the last 7 years that I am working on behalf of the whole community. I'm working on behalf of the whole community. You find one project that I'm involved in which doesn't of the whole community, and yet people didn't believe me, and yet they said she's progressive, that woman. I joined Highgate Synagogue. I believe that we should be able, as a president of the Board of Deputies, hopefully, to be just as secure, just as happy, just as comfortable anywhere in our community. And Highgate reached out to me, and I didn't just join any United Synagogue. I joined one of the best United Synagogues, one that understands community. And what I do there is I learn. I learned about Shabbat UK. I learned about women's shiurim. I learned about, what other big things have I been to? The 70 days for 70 years. I've been to an enormous amount of events at Highgate Synagogue, which have taught me about how a good United Synagogue builds community. That's what I do. I build community, and that's why I joined Highgate Synagogue. And it in no way was intended to delegitimize who I am. I think you know who I am. I am somebody who builds community and has the values that I've been talking about this evening.
Thank you very much. I think after that, Laura, you can have the rest of the evening. Have you got a question, quickie?
I was going to clarify, but you're still a member of ALIF, and you spend much more time at ALIF than you do at Highgate, don't you?
Of course. Friday nights, you will see me in my favourite seat every Friday, pretty much, at ALIF. It's where my children were brought up. It's where our family membership is. That's where I grew up. Doesn't mean to say I'm not happy going to Highgate, but yes, of course, I haven't left ALIF.
Very, very well clarified. Okay. Well, we'll let Laura go. She deserves the evening off. Thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
had some.
Alex, are you ready?
As ready as I'll ever be, I expect.
Excellent. We've already seen two of the presidential candidates, both of whom have acquitted themselves differently to one another, but to reiterate, they're both good.
Okay, we've been filmed.
No, we're in the luxurious position of, none of the candidates is anything less than utterly well motivated, utterly able. No one's a disaster, but it's up to them to prove themselves. And of course, Robert, I would expect you of all my friends to qualify any statement that I make. But seriously, the floor is Alex's, and I'm going to ask David to take over here.
Okay.
And then we'll
Just
ask
like to open up, Alex, and then we'll ask you some questions.
Okay, so yeah.
Go ahead.
So David, thank you and everybody here for coming to hear what we all have to say and what I have to say. It's very good to be in this building. I have been here before. I was just saying that we've met here a couple of times in the past, so this is familiar territory in that sense. I was going to start by saying something about the board itself, actually, because I think there's a kind of view in the community, in parts of the community, that the board isn't very much, isn't terribly important. And I find, and I've found 3 years as a vice president, that actually, particularly when I'm travelling on behalf of the board, and I've travelled quite extensively on behalf of the board, and I immediately say I've been paying my own way every time I've travelled. No expenses have been passed on to the board for that travel. When I've travelled on behalf of the board, what I find is that people are actually quite jealous of the British Jewish community and the way it organises itself. And that they regard the Board of Deputies as kind of exemplar, a tremendous exemplar of what can be achieved in a well-organised community. And many of them actually would like to replicate the model that we have. And indeed, at various times recently, there have been groups have come to see me to ask about that kind of organisational structure. And so I think we focus a lot on the Constitution, the way we run ourselves, and go around hitting ourselves and saying we're not up to very much. But actually we are up to a great deal. And if you look down the achievements of the last 3 years in terms of our ability to engage in a whole range of issues, from the European elections through to the current general election, but also on other issues as well. I think, and the traditional issues of defending Jewish practice of one kind or another, I think we performed much better than people would have you believe. People always ask me, Alex, why on earth do you want to do this job? And do you really have the leadership qualities? So my immediate answer is, of course I have the leadership qualities. I've been around the board now for 3 years as a vice president. Before that, I was the deputy chairman of the international division for 3 years, and I also served for 3 years on the finance and organisation committee as well. And I think I have unusual credentials in this regard, because as a senior journalist, and I've worked both as a international reporter, a senior editor at The Guardian, email writing about finance and economics, a daily column. I have, in all of those roles, an ability to reach some of the great policymakers in Britain, diplomats, politicians, senior executives of major corporations, and think tanks as well. I have an enormous contacts, and I've been able to leverage those contacts, I think, for the better use of the Jewish community. So, as a small example, last week I was able to reach, because I've been moaning about this to the guy for a long time, I was able to reach the chief executive of the cooperative movement, and as many of you will know here, the cooperative movement is the only commercial organisation in Britain, large commercial organisation, which is boycotting at the moment some goods from the West Bank. And because I've been writing about this and talking to him over a long period of time, I and Stephen Jaffe, who makes some progress. And at the time of Operation Protective Age last summer, I was able to get on the phone both to the chairman of Sainsbury and the chairman within 48 hours after shops had been cleared of goods, and able to deal with those issues on the telephone because I know both people concerned. So there is that kind of ability to leverage, I suppose, if you're a financial person, I think that's the term you would use, not a very nice not a very nice word particularly, but to leverage those contacts into a better place for the board. So I think that that's a useful thing for me to be able to do. And I hope I would be able to bring that role to the role of president. And I also think that, and I think there are one or two members of my division here, I see Gabriel sitting at the back there, that I think that I'm able to deal with quite, with difficult situations in a kind of collegiate and calm way. And I don't think that's always the case at the board. I was on this similar division for 3 years before I became the chairman, and I can tell you it was a very different place in the previous 3 years than it was to the current 3 years. And I think that we are a community which is very disputative, and we do cover a huge range of views. And I'd like to think that we could try and find some ways, and I know we've developed codes of conduct. Gabriel and I have been working together on something for the grassroots organisations to try and bring some discipline to the way they behave in recent months. I do believe that we need to find some way of conducting our affairs in a much more respectful, much more collegiate, and much less hostile atmosphere, so that all views can be properly heard. And I think that's something which I would hope to bring to the leadership role. Secondly, I also mentioned that I have deep roots in my roots are sort of varied. I'm the son of a Holocaust refugee. My father came in 1989 in the bottom of a boat, a member of his family from behind. I have that experience behind me. And I also, on my mother's side, Jewish experience. So I have those two wedded together in my being. I also come from a regional community. Born and brought me, I use this in a very guarded way. I don't live in the ghetto of northwest London. I live in southwest London in Richmond upon Thames, where we have a smaller community and a community where we can behave in a sort of the way we wish to behave in following our Judaism. We don't have the sort of the same restrictive influences on us that you might get in northwest London, even though I do represent United Synagogue on the Board of Deputies. But I have very strong Jewish values. I believe it, absolutely very strongly in traditional Jewish practices. I was brought up in a very traditional way. Two uncles who are rabbis in the family. So that's part of my being, and I like to lead services in the synagogue as well. But I also have a passionate belief in social justice. For years, as a journalist, I've written extensively on development. I've visited some pretty horrible places, from Haiti through to places in Africa, in writing about those issues as a journalist. And I have strong links into the development community. I have lots of friends within the World Bank, including the president, who I know reasonably well, and I've interviewed at least 3 times. And I, in my Jewish community role here, I'm the co-chair of the community's group which deals with NGOs, so Oxfam and so on. So I work with the JLC on that and work on that particular area. So that's something which is of very strong interest to me and part of my core beliefs. So just looking forward, this is obviously going to be a very competitive race for president. Got three good, strong candidates, all with very different qualities, I think. All I would say is I'm a pretty determined person. I I like to listen, but then make decisions quite quickly. I try not to lose my temper. I don't change my mind too often. I try not to change my mind too often, but sometimes it needs to be changed. But I try and stick with a steady path. And I think that, that looking forward, the board faces enormous challenges, organisational challenges, merger challenges, and other challenges. But I see those all as opportunities to make the board a better place and to be a better, to lead the community in a better way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Right, are there any questions? Okay, you go ahead. Mark. Yeah.
Do you feel that the board might benefit from Israel Division or Committee?
Well, we do actually have something. We have something called the Israel Working Group, which I actually chair. It's been a bit intermittent, I have to say, but it has done some good work, and it's been working. Stephen Jaffe is a key figure for it, and one of the first pieces of work we did was a survey of communities who felt that they needed to know more about Israel, and we found 17 different communities, I think it was, out of the ones we surveyed. We went towards, and of those 17 communities, I think we visited all of them and tried to offer them some support. Now, it's clear from board debates that Israel is on everybody's mind all of the time. But, we're not a branch of the Israeli embassy. What I think is that we need a better understanding of Israel and a different narrative for Israel, rather than the one that we often get at the board, which is we get the two sides of the debate. On one side, the kind of conservative, Greater Israel view of Israel and agreements which date back to San Remo and God knows what else, which have absolutely no meaning to most of us. And at the other end, the view that somehow somehow what the Israeli government is doing it needs to be reined in, constrained, and so on. I mean, it's none of our business actually, any of that. It's up to the Israeli population to do that. Now, there may be things which happen in Israel which we don't like, and there's ways of dealing with that. And the way of dealing with it is to use your clout as you have as a Jewish leader to go and talk to the Israeli embassy here and let your views be known. But what I think is required, and I think this is where in Israel a more active than the one we've had, although we have done some very good work and had some very good debates, would be able, I think, to change the narrative about the way we deal with Israel. And I think that narrative is changing as we speak. So last week I chaired a session at the Israel-Britain Trade Organization where there were about 80 or 90 leading business people, both Jewish and ones who weren't Jewish. It was an interview with Ian Livingstone, who's the trade minister in the Tory government, former head of BT. And it was really interesting to see how the business community views Israel. And sometimes you wish a bit of that reality would come into the debates which we have at the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Lionel.
So a long answer.
In your video, you refer to your job, your presumably full-time job at the Daily Mail as your day job.
I've just come from there now, yeah.
Right. Well, presuming that being president of the board is itself a full-time job.
It's not a full-time job.
Well,
Answer the question.
Vivian feels it is. It seems that there's been praying out, but you choose to perhaps break from that. But do you not see a tremendous conflict when you have articles like the Ralph Miliband article, where the president of the board surely needs to be seen as impartial, yet you're an employee and you have to defend your company's position?
I think everybody has conflicts in their daily lives. So if you're head of Mitzvah Day, you have a conflict about fundraising against being the of the Board of Deputies. That's an inherent conflict. If you work for as one of my committee members does, if you work for the Sephardi Jewish community, you have a conflict about what you do for the board and what you do for the Sephardi community and so on. So I don't see any conflict at all. I write about economics and finance. What my paper is, I'm not responsible for what appears in the Daily Mail. A lot of it I agree with, will agree with, and a lot of it I would disagree with. It's a paper which actually has a huge, diverse range of views in it, and I don't accept the premise. As far as the job of the board being a full-time job, I think that's been a mistake. I think that the president there's been a tendency to micromanage at the board, to interfere in every decision. We've got a brilliant staff. We have a tremendous new chief executive. We have great public affairs officers. We have people who are experts on education, interfaith, almost every area important to the community. And we should be setting the strategy and executing it as a president. There will be moments, always, and tonight was a bit of a conflict. Tonight's the night before the general election. I had to write a leading article tonight before I came here. And so it was a bit of a rush to do that. But I got here, and I'm before you now, so I think I can manage those conflicts.
Thanks very much. Andrew?
Many of the people here have been voting for Laura, but you would have hoped that most of us would choose to have voted for you as our second preference. I know you didn't say that your daughter has been accepted at Learbeck College, so I'll say it for you. And therefore we would have expected you to be someone who would understand this more closely. I want you to apologise. I want you to apologise for two things. I believe that both you and Johnny should have stood up very publicly to Stephen Pack. Johnny came in here and he actually was very public about it. You said nothing. I want you to apologise for that, because I think it's if you can't expect you to stand up now, how can we expect you to stand up for our community if we were attacked? If we're attacked.
Okay.
There. The second thing I want is concerning flip-flop. I don't think I believe it should be a harmonious discussion that goes on. And your comments in your video and other ways about Laura flip-flopping, I think is unfortunate. And I would ask you, and I want us to feel that we can probably transfer to you. But I want us to have that relationship. And I feel very upset at the moment, because I've sat with the executive for the last 3 years. I feel upset and feel let down as Progressive Jew.
Well, I did say at the beginning that there should be a heckling, but we'll take that as a question, shall we? What would you like to say?
Well, of course. Sorry?
No, please, Andrew, you've had your say. Enough is enough.
Andrew, what am I apologising for? I'm sorry.
No.
So let me answer. Let me go to the 2 points, your two substantive points that you raised. So the first substantive point you raised was a point about Stephen Pack. I didn't see what I had no advance warning of what Stephen Pack was going to say. Clearly, his remarks were totally unfortunate, very divisive, and shouldn't have been said. But nobody came to me and actually asked me for a reaction to the remarks when they were made. It didn't happen in that way.
Right.
So that's the first thing. So, and secondly, on the flip-flop argument, well, let's look at this for a moment. And I mean, I don't want to. This is not going to do me much good, presumably, with this particular group. Let's think about it for one moment. So here we have a candidate to be president of the Board of Deputies. First of all, the candidate moved from being a member of the Reform community to joining the United Synagogue just weeks or months before the election campaign began. Then the candidate said she was going to run for president. Then she stood down for president. Then she was going to run for vice president. Then the level of the opposition to be vice president, she stood down from being vice president. In the meantime, she's holding private negotiations with other candidates about what role she would have if she were to be vice president. All of this is going on. Then out of the blue, in the media, without any courtesy of calling or talking to people about what her intentions are, she announces that she's back in the race. Well, if that's not flip-flopping, I don't know what is.
Okay, thank you. Roger.
Unpopular politicians, people like George Bush and Netanyahu, who are desperate for re-election, tend to engage in the politics of fear. Now, in your covering email, you emphasised the fear that the Jewish community is expected to feel about anti-Semitism and things like that. You presented a very slick presentation in the video, but it is vision-free. You said nothing about them.
Yeah, Roger, it's got to be a question.
What is your question?
I'm very grateful to you. I'm coming to it. What is... I can't believe that you're interrupting us. What is your vision for the Board of Deputies? There's a great deal about Alex Brummer, but nothing about the board in your video.
My vision for the board is that it grows in its role as the leadership group in the most important leadership group in the British Jewish community, and in order to do that, it needs to strengthen its governance. And I think lots of plans, thanks to work of the gentleman in front of me here, a lot of plans already afoot, including the Le Surge plan to try and to make it much more effective organisation. I think we need to grow. I'm one of those people who think we need to grow much closer to the Jewish Leadership Council. I've talked to them about this at the most senior level. and I believe that's something which has to happen. I think we're, in terms of resources, for instance, I think the idea that we have 2 groups in the community, each spending around about £1 million each year on their work, I think those are the sums involved. 2 chief executives, 2 public affairs officers. There's a lot more, and 2 lots of suppliers of all the services that we use, printing, videos, whatever else. There's some sound economic judgments to be made there about how that ought to work and how you can start bringing those things much closer together. And in terms of policy, I do think that we can bring a much better narrative, and I tried to say that in the Israel answer, to the relationship with Israel. And I think that narrative is all around, and you may say this plays to my core strengths, but it's all around the economy. Because I do think that if you look at what's happening to UK Israeli trade, for instance, which is now 3 billion and rising exponentially, 1 out of every 7 prescriptions health service, 1 out of every 7 is filled by an Israeli company. In this country know that. There is a whole narrative there which we need to understand as deputies and be able to propagate in our local communities, beyond our local communities, and that's how deputies need to work. They need to work looking down and up. And I think one of the mistakes the community made during Operation Protective Age this summer was that it tended to look to the politicians only. And there was tremendous successes. I mean, the way that David Cameron dealt with the Middle East conflict was, for most of the community, very, very helpful this summer. But what wasn't helpful was that we lost the community in that debate. We didn't talk to the community. We didn't explain to the community what was going on. We didn't allow the community to have their voice about what was going on. And I'd like to see all of that happen if I were president.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
You were the first candidate for your hat into the ring. I just wondered how you felt about it. It presents several questions. I mean, for instance, if the other 2 candidates hadn't, would you have been happier? Because you would have you would have been president and there'd be no competition. And also, you don't know what they're thinking, but it could be. Do you think, you're not good enough, so we have to do something about it? So, do you have any thoughts about that?
I decided early on that I thought that that I'd been vice president for 3 years. It's been an interesting role, but I felt like I wanted to take it further. You can take it further if you're a vice president is to become president. So that was the first bit of my thinking. The other thing which happened, which I'm not this is an interesting session to discuss this, is that the moment I sort of made my mind up was actually at a United Synagogue Trustees meeting, where the board officers were not reporting but discussing issues with the United Synagogue, and it seemed to me that I really felt that I felt this was an opportunity for me to really become involved in a greater way. So that's how it happened. As far as the opposition is concerned, we actually, this group of HOs has, over the last 3 years, generally speaking, I mean, there's always quirks in this, worked reasonably well together, and been very collegiate, managed to hold the line on a whole series of issues from the Oxfam vote to the relationship with the Muslim Council of Britain, and most recently Yachad, although there was a dissenter on Yachad. But generally speaking, we've managed to have a collegiate view about things, and that's been very encouraging. So they have, as far as I'm concerned, they have an absolutely perfect right to stand. I mean, we all come from slightly different positions. Our whole lives are slightly different. But they're both extraordinarily good candidates. I mean, Laura's done enormously terrific work developing the community and social action of the board and interfaith. And Johnny has done enormously good work in taking on anti-Semitism in some of the most difficult places in the UK. So, they're very good candidates, and I'm very pleased that they're there and that the community has a good choice of people with very different backgrounds and very different experiences.
Okay, thanks. Just one more.
Yeah. One of the areas we haven't covered so far is on qualities and women. If you were the president, no, if you were the president, how do you see over the 3-year period your vision for for women and also from other communities, lesbian and gay involvement in the within the board?
I'm not going to say that I don't think that women are a great idea at the board. Of course, I want to see, it's terrific actually, for instance, that, in this coming election we have a large number of women candidates for the honorary officer's job, and that's very important. But it's also important that we have it at every level of the board, and I'd like to see, I actually believe in some sort of for instance, at the last board meeting, we voted to put 2 extra people on the executive. Now, if we could try and reserve those two jobs in some way, was it 2 or 4? 4. All right, 4. So if we could reserve 2 for women and 2 for younger deputies, I think that would be a great way to approach things and to change the shape of the way the executive operates. I'm also very keen that we try and improve the efficiency or the working practices of deputies. And so I think some sort of assessment whereby deputies' performance is assessed by the number of meetings, the number of speeches, the work they do in their communities, and the work they do for the board. And I think that because in my own working experience, women tend to work harder than men because they have to in order to get on. I think that would help bring women forward in a strong way. But there are all sorts of problems for women. I know that when I've been doing some ringing around, you find that people are sort of they can't talk to you between 5 and 7 because they're putting the kids to bed because the husbands aren't home from work and so on. All of that kind of stuff. And we need to be much more flexible in the way we arrange our meetings. So, for instance, we don't hold division meetings on Sundays because I think some of the staff find that quite difficult. But we have to overcome those obstacles, even if we, the honorary officers, have to take the notes ourselves at the meetings. We need to be able to do that. And I think that would allow women to be at meetings get to, because they do often have husbands or spouses or partners, whatever their relationships are at that point. As far as lesbian and gays are concerned, I don't look at people through their sexuality. I work in a department at my office which has all manner of people from all different backgrounds, and even in a paper which is a conservative and right-wing paper, we have quite a few gay and lesbian voices, and so I'm used to dealing with that in my daily life, and I don't think it would be a problem for me to deal with it within the Jewish community. In fact, I think those voices would add some variety and texture to what we do.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, time has drawn to a close.
I'm willing to take another question.
So, one more question. Sorry, who has?
I prefer questions to speeches.
Okay.
Alex, I appreciate what you said about not trying to dictate to the Israeli government, but I'm very confused about the board's policy on a 2-state solution. What's your view of that, and how, if that is the board's policy, how can we progress it?
It is the board's policy, and I personally believe that a 2-state solution is the right way to go. And I don't believe in a greater Israel and being an occupying power and all the rest of it. I think in disputed territories, I've never believed that. I've always felt, and again, I'm sorry, I'm going to come back to the same theme. I've always felt, and this is actually true, that the best years of relationship between Israel and its Palestinian neighbours when there's been maximum economic cooperation between the parties. And I think that the way to build a solution is to open up those economic paths. It's interesting that John Kerry, when he was doing his negotiation last year, which fell apart, a big part of that, the first thing he put in place was a $4 billion economic package, which involved companies from Israel, the United States, inside the Palestinian territories and Jordan. And 1 or 2 of those projects actually got underway. So there is a water project now in Aqaba, which involves Israel, the Palestinians, and Jordan. A joint water cleansing, a joint water project. And I think, and the World Bank. The World Bank is the funding organisation behind it. I think that the more you put pressure to create those economic ties, so when Israel cuts off tax income from the Palestinians, as it has done as a sort of collective punishment, as they have done, because Israel is the tax collector on the West Bank, as you may or may not know that. They collect the taxes on behalf of the Palestinians. So the sales taxes and the income taxes and so on. And then they pass them back. But when there's tension, the current Israeli government has cut off those taxes. I think that using that economic weapon and cutting off economic development and the flow of money and all the rest of it is a very bad policy. So I think really building some strong economic ties would help bind these peoples together, because they are actually one economic unit. And you can visit some of those industrial parks where Palestinians work in the West Bank, in Israeli-owned plants, and you can see that that they get enormous satisfaction of working together. And I think that there's a lot more of that can be done.
Thank you very much. So, have you got any final thought?
No, I mean, I'd like to say this, that I'm sorry if people found a bit of that video offensive. It wasn't meant to be offensive. It was meant to be sharp and smart. And I do genuinely, believe that I can work well with people. I think that my record at the board is one of a collegiate record. I've not walked out of rooms. I've not banged the table. I've listened to what people have to say, and I've tried to bring their ideas together and give everybody a good hearing, whatever they have. And we've had several quite controversial issues come towards the international division in the last few months. And I think we dealt with them in a sensible and civilised way. So I had hoped to bring to the presidential role that good sense and steadiness, which I have. And I think that I'm used to dealing with, and I've said, this is boastful, it may sound boastful, but sometimes you have to be boastful. I do think that I'm quite good at dealing with people at a very senior level and have very good relationships. So somebody raised the question of Ralph Miliband. All I can say is I've known Ed Miliband since he was a junior official at the Treasury. I know him with first name friends. I can call him up whenever I want to. And the altercation which may have occurred over Ralph Miliband did not last more than that. And I've seen him many times since. And I think I can maintain those relationships both with the current government and with the alternative government if the alternative government comes to power.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Very helpful. I think, on the whole, you can have the rest of the evening off.
Oh, good. Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you, David.
Well, that's very kind, and thank you very much
for
coming.
Thank you, Alex.
That's very, very helpful. And all the best. Thanks for coming.